Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of Surviving Life's Pickles. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Again, we couldn't continue to do this show without everybody tuning in every week. We are so grateful that you have chosen to take this time out of your day today to listen to this episode and our amazing guests and the information that they have for you today to hopefully help you navigate some of your life's challenges and survive those pickles in your upcoming weeks. But as we always start, we start off with gratitude and then we go into introducing our guest and what we're here today. So I'm going to have Hill start today
Okay.
and we're going to just run around and here we go.
Here we go. Okay. I am grateful for a lot of things today, and I I'm grateful for coming home on a Friday night and me and my husband just being on the exact same wavelength of we're both exhausted. It's been a long week, and he looks at me and he says, "Can we just sit on the couch and watch Masked Singer, and then we'll go give each other back rubs?" And I'm grateful for back rubs. I'm grateful for peaceful, calm nights. And I'm just grateful for the life that we've built together today.
And yes, I have to clarify, we did watch Masked Singer. I know there's a lot of controversy, but it is one of the best shows on TV. It's just fun. It's entertaining. So you can come at me all you want, but I love that show.
He does. And it's lighthearted, it's fun. And we love the guessing game part of it.
Yeah.
So,
Oh.
and we love music. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go back a couple weeks and get back on this kick that I've been on with using some lyrics of a song to describe how I'm grateful today. And, we're recording this Easter weekend. If you're Christian, there's a lot going on this weekend, with everything. And for me, it also, this weekend is kind of that first weekend in April. The birds are out. It kind of brings back the, fresh starts, restarts, renewals. That's kind of what I feel. And this song, and I've said this multiple times here on the show, is I have a few songs that I listen to in the morning to just kind of get me ready for the day. And this one is just as number one. This song is number one on my list. And it's Hard Fought Hallelujah by Brandon Lake and Jelly Roll. And the first part of this song, and I just want to read it because it doesn't matter where you're at in your story. You're just not alone. And that's what this song really brings to me, is you're just not alone in your story. There's always somebody there, even when you can't feel it. It's sometimes when you need it the most. So I just wanted to read the introduction into the chorus on this one. And it's, yeah, I don't always feel it, but yeah, that's when I need it the most. So I'm gonna keep on singing till my soul catches up with my song. There's times when my hands go up freely, times that it costs. There's days when a praise comes out easy, days when it takes all the strength I've got. I'll bring my hard fought, heartfelt, been through hell, hallelujah. And I'll bring my storm tossed, torn cell, story to tell, hallelujah. 'Cause God, you've been patient. God, you've been gracious, faithful, whatever I'm feeling or facing. So I'll bring my hard fought, heartfelt, it is well. Hallelujah. And that just really sums up a lot of the emotions I have today.
Because you were saying this morning, it's a hallelujah day.
It is, because it's been a rough week, like Hillary said, and you don't know where you're at. And sometimes you do just feel lost, but you can just always reach out and you'll be heard. And that's kind of how I'm feeling this weekend.
I like that.
So, okay, well, our wonderful guest, Amber Washington, here today. It's your turn.
Oh, God. I'm so emotional already this morning, so thank you so much for having me, and the emotion really is what I'm grateful for, as I'm sitting here crying already, um, and listening to the 2 of you, it's my ability to feel. It's my ability to feel the hardest things and not want to numb them anymore.
Mhm.
That's what I'm feeling very grateful for this morning.
I
Perfect.
really like that.
Yeah.
It's very beautifully put. We've talked
We've
a
actually said
lot
that one
about
before.
of how we just numb out those feelings, and I mean, sometimes it's the smallest things that can really make you feel the biggest feels.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Totally
So,
agree.
yeah. Well, Amber, we're so excited and so grateful that you decided to come on the show today. We got introduced to you by our wonderful friend Jess Ferguson from Frankie and Jess, and she's so amazing. She is the light of this world.
She is.
And
Yeah.
She definitely, reached out to me and said, "You have to have this girl
Oh,
on your show," and I was really excited and grateful that she referred you over to
yeah,
us. Amber is the author of the book Whole with a W,
yeah,
and you are the founder of the Voice Collective,
correct.
and we're gonna find out a little bit more about you and your story and your book, and I have a whole bunch of questions for you, so I'm really excited, and, um, I think first off, I wanna kinda go back and hear a little bit about you were saying that you grew up right along this same street that we're on here in
Yeah.
Orem. Talk a little bit about your childhood and the things that brought you to where you are today, if you're ready for that.
It's gonna take me just a second.
I know. It's hard coming back to a place where hard things happened, to revisit those places. I I'm an addict in recovery, and as you were telling me coming back to these places, I have several places like that in Salt Lake and St. George that have a lot of trauma centered around certain locations. And it can be very, very difficult to go back to those places. We've had people on the show before that talked about a traumatizing event that happened in the place and hoping to turn the story a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah,
and change that location and change the memory of what happened in that location. We had a one of our very early episodes, her name was Rachel, and she actually had her grandson pee on a rock in a very traumatic location so that they could change the memory
interesting.
of that trauma
Yeah.
and turn it into something lighthearted and funny. So,
That's something that's very relatable to me. One of the things that has gotten me through anything that I've been through is my stubbornness
mhm,
and this stubbornness that just says the people that have tried to break me don't get to win.
correct.
And so taking different experiences, places, people, whatever it is, and a- and trying to make new memories, um, because my abuse is sexual, intimacy is, and I know that there's a lot of people that can relate to this, but it can be very difficult, and so even and especially I think with sex, there's different things when I've felt safe and loved and cared about that some people might avoid altogether. But because it was something that was taken from me, I wanted to find ways to find comfort and enjoyment in those things. Driving here, I mean, when we talked and you guys said Orem, I was like, okay. When you guys said 1600 North, I was like, oh shit. And as I'm driving here this morning, just really realizing that, my abuse took place a half a mile from where we're recording.
Yeah.
And you're right. You don't necessarily realize the effect or the effects of different things that we go through, and really all of the different ways that they can affect us. The visceral reactions are fierce at times, and it's not like this is not something that I've thought about, home or different memories. And I even raised my boys, I mean, I didn't leave Orem for a really long time. And so it at this point in my healing journey, I'm no longer surprised by my reactions.
Yeah.
And one of the core things that I have learned, and this really comes back to my book because, as you mentioned, my book is called Whole. It's Whole, My Journey to W, and so that W is in parentheses for a very specific reason. But as I was finally writing my book in 2022, it that came off of me wanting to share my story publicly, at a tech company that I worked for, which is the last place that I ever would have expected to share something so personal. But I had done a ton of research leading up to that. And so when I had finally shared my story, I was like, okay, now's the time. Like, I took a week and a half off of work and I sat in my recliner and my laptop and I got 40,000 words, out of my fingers and out of my brain. And as I'm getting to the end, I just remember thinking, like, for so long, I felt like I couldn't write this book because I wasn't healed. And so I felt like a hypocrite writing a book about healing. And as I'm getting to the very end, it hits me and I'm like, oh my gosh, like your book is literally called Your Journey to W.
Yeah.
It's not the destination, and that was just such a light bulb moment for me in that I'm always going to be healing because life is always lifing, and what the, what going down a healing journey has done for me and what I hope it has done for so many other people and what it should do is that it then gives us the resources and the tools and the know-how to deal with things that are inevitably going to happen that we couldn't handle in the same way before we educated ourselves, before we did therapy, before we found community, before we healed.
Yeah.
Because you can definitely heal different parts of you, but you will never be healed.
Yeah. It's always an ongoing thing. And I've mentioned this probably multiple times now, but the word recovery is an ongoing thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are recovering from life. We are recovering from addiction. We're recovering from mental health. We're recovering from diseases, just life in general.
Yeah.
We're not healed. We're not cured. We're just recovering. So,
Yeah.
and I love that. Scott?
Well, let's go back before we get too far ahead of ourselves here and just whatever you want to share, let's give a little context to everybody listening, kind of during those early years that kind of got you to writing the book. Just a little bit of kind of what happened to you early in life that has started you on this path you're on now.
Thank you, because that's really the question that she asked.
Yes.
And I'm very good at going in so many different directions. So thank you for guiding me back to that.
Yeah.
It was just before my 9th birthday that I disclosed to my parents that my grandfather had been sexually abusing me. And there are pieces of this puzzle that will, I've managed now, and I'm actually very grateful for this when speaking about gratitude, that I really have been able to put so many of those pieces together. And I think that there's way too many survivors out there that never will get that opportunity. So I'm grateful for that. But the one key piece of this puzzle that I will never be able to really put together is, when did the abuse happen? I get asked that a lot. How old were you when it started? I don't know.
Mhm.
What I know now, and because I understand grooming and because I understand so much more of this from an educated adult perspective, is that grooming starts with just like the simplest, littlest things. And predators don't just groom victims, they groom everybody around too, because the majority of sexual abuse is perpetrated by somebody that the victim or victims know, all too often family members, but somebody that is trusted. And so, in my bones, I feel like I was probably about 6 or 7 years old when all of that started. Um, but I wasn't just being sexually abused by my grandfather. I was also being sexually abused by my best friend's older brother. We both were. So that's something that I write about in the book. In fact, that's aside from my prologue, that's really where I start is being in a closet, um, watching what was happening, and knowing that I was going to be next. Um, and so that actually came out first because I then repeated what was happening to me to some of the little boys that my mom was babysitting. And and so at that point, my mom, I just remember my mom telling me that she knew that something was off with me, right? And so when that came out, that was the conclusion, and rightfully so. Um, and again, like the timeline between, me saying what was going on with my friend and her brother versus when I disclosed with what was happening with my grandfather. I don't know how much time was between that. I feel like probably 6 months or something. Um, but yeah, that's, I mean,
That's kind of what started it all
yeah,
for you.
yeah, and that's, 8 years old. That's 8 years of now I'm 45. That's just such a teeny tiny portion of my life and even of my childhood, and so I I have some very beautiful memories, which I do write about in my book, and I talk about, what life looked like or felt like for me prior to that. Growing up here in Orem, just right behind where the gym and everything is right now over here on 1600 North, that was all field for
Yeah.
the longest time. It was a horse field, and then it was just a field, and we didn't have neighbors. It was us and just a whole bunch of field. And I was a tomboy and we built forts and we ran around the neighborhood and we played night games and, very close friends that still to this day, um, from that neighborhood and just all of the fun, but so many of my memories, from really, it feels like from kindergarten on, are very clouded. And when I think about things now, it just breaks my heart that that innocence was stolen from me,
Yeah.
because it completely changed my lens on life and it put me into survival mode from such a young age. Um,
So you said that you actually were able to disclose
yeah.
that you were being sexually abused when you were 9.
Yeah, it was just before my ninth birthday.
That's very rare.
Yes, it is.
Um, what was the reaction that you got and received when that when you were able to disclose that?
I don't remember I don't remember the exact reaction. What I do remember is that my parents were prepping to go to the temple and that, we our typical babysitter kind of canceled last minute. And so I remember my mom just on the phone trying to find somebody. And at some point, either my mom or my dad said, let's call Walt. And I just remember just this pit in my stomach because up until, like the abuse was getting worse. Um, and I don't even know if I can explain that in any more than that, right? I just remember it was getting worse.
Yeah.
And I remember being very afraid and not even just afraid, like knowing that if he came into our home, because the abuse had not happened in my home at this, well, ever, um, I knew what my night was going to look like, you know. And then also, I'm the oldest of five at this point. I have two younger sisters, um, you know, and to our knowledge, to this day, I'm the only one that has disclosed, you know. So thank God for that. But also, that's a very lonely place to be.
Yeah.
I'd take the loneliness day in, day out over anybody else, you know, in my family having to had experienced this. But yeah, it is. It's incredibly rare. I think it's like, I want to say 30% of childhood victims disclose in their youth, and especially like while it's happening.
Yeah.
And so I just remember going into my parents' room, you know, and just saying, I need to tell you something. That's really the last memory that I have, other than they left. So they still went to the temple that night, and that is such a core wound, you know. I I understand. My mom has explained. My dad will not talk about this. My mom, thank goodness, will and has so much. But just said that she just felt like she needed to be in a place to for, you know,
To process.
yeah, exactly. And as a parent, I can understand that. And even as, you know, as their child, I can understand that. But the wound that that created for me is like immense. Definitely a core wound of abandonment,
Yeah.
you know, which is odd to say because my parents never abandoned me. My parents were still married. You know, my parents, it's not like I ever left the home and didn't have parents. But so they go to the temple that night. And I just remember I'm quite sure that it was the next day they you know, they come to my grandfather's house and at first he denies it and he says, "Oh, I just rub her belly." You know, you guys see that because that was part of the grooming process, was me sitting on his lap, him being very affectionate, you know, rubbing my stomach in front of everybody. So that was normalized. Um, and I don't remember this conversation at all, but it's clear that my response was, "No, here's what he's doing." And that's what I had said the night before, you know, so I stuck to my guns, which I also, little me was a badass,
Yeah.
you know, I, God, was she tough.
Wow.
Um,
Like, talk about a warrior. And that again, it's so rare for a child to be brave enough and vulnerable enough to speak out for themselves about that. I mean, wow. It, you go, girl. So, I mean,
yeah, yeah, this stuff heals little Amber,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Were there consequences
Yeah, yes.
for your perpetrators? Like,
Oh,
were
no.
no.
There were tons of so the irony in all of this, so it's unique, you know, that I disclosed. What is even more unique probably is that my grandfather ended up admitting it. So when I stuck to my guns and they go back to him, he admits it.
Okay.
So, but what he had said to me is so similar to too many other stories, and that's basically, if you tell, you will get in big trouble. And
Mm.
boy, was he right.
Hmm.
You know, the consequences of all of this were mine.
Mm.
So my parents call the police. You know, Walt was never arrested. He was charged. So really my next memory is walking down, going to the Orem City courthouse, which is connected to the library. But at this point in my life, I've only been to the library. You know, Oh, this just even gives me chills just even thinking about this moment because it's really such a defining moment of like childhood versus adulthood,
Yeah.
right? The public library where kids go and you get read to, and it was just probably a weekly thing for us.
Mm.
And knowing that all of these other buildings are there, but they feel so ominous, so much bigger than myself. And so I'm not worried about what those buildings are for until I have to walk through the hallway that, you know, I mean, I feel like we walked through the library and then there's just this god awful brown epoxy floor plus this brick. I mean, they've taken the epoxy like all the way up, right? So this is how I remember it. And it's just loud. I can hear it's just my dad and I. I believe that my mom was probably asked not to attend, and they had prepped me with, you need to be there, in the event that the judge wants to speak with you, you're going to need to be there. So it's my dad and I. I don't even remember my dad like holding my hand or offering like any type of comfort. I just remember the sound of our shoes. And then sitting, both of us sitting outside of the courtroom. And I just remember being little enough that my feet don't touch the floor. And at some point, my dad goes in and I'm left by myself. And then he comes out and he says, "Okay, let's go." And it wasn't until I was 33 years old that I found out what happened in that courtroom, that he went in and asked the judge to take mercy, have mercy on my grandfather, because he felt like he would die in prison. And the judge listened. So the consequence was that my grandfather was offered a plea in abeyance, and that as long as he did therapy for 1 year and didn't get in trouble for 1 year, that it was like that this never happened. Um, in all of this research that I've done, again, these being able to put these puzzle pieces together is a miracle in and of itself. But I found out years later, I reached out to the man who was my grandparents' bishop at that time. My mom remembered his name. I found him on Facebook. Didn't expect him to respond, and he did, and confirmed for me that my grandfather was never disciplined through the church at all. So no disfellowship, no excommunication. I was told that he didn't want to participate. He wasn't interested and they couldn't force him, which I think is crap, because I think, why do you have to have a bishop's council to excommunicate somebody who's, committed a felony and a sexual one at that? That's a whole other topic for another day. Um, but going back to the consequence, to me, no.
No.
I've been in jail twice.
Yeah.
My grandfather has never sat a day in jail, and that son of a bitch only had to live for 10 years after all of this. Got remarried on the day that he was released from probation. He proposed to his second wife the day. And that was December, they were married the following February. So less than 2 years after my disclosure, he and my grandmother have divorced. He has gotten remarried. He goes into this new family that looks picture perfect, and we still see him. We still see him.
Yeah. So was it your dad's dad or your mom's dad?
Yeah, it was
your
my dad's dad. Yeah.
You want to try to understand your dad's side of it, that this is his father. All feelings aside, you're having to choose between your father or your daughter kind of thing. But I had two friends that were raised in abuse, very similar to yours. And thankfully, their mother left him. And they they disconnected their lives from him in a sense, but it was still their father, and they still came across, there's still those feelings inside of
Yeah.
how do you just completely disown this
Yeah.
person? And unfortunately, he was also never charged, never had any consequences from it.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is that it continued. And it continued with other people. Do you know if with him not having any consequences, the fact that your father almost was allowing that to happen again?
There were boundaries set in place, that as I mean, as far as like we were concerned, he was never to be alone with any of us.
Mhm.
So again, to my knowledge, no.
I didn't know,
But
but
also this new family came in, and um I believe that the woman that married my grandfather knew. I just think that there's no way that she couldn't. What I do know is that there were two different times in my life when I was in my 20s, and then another time I was in my late 30s, or mid 30s, that I reached out to her. So my grandfather passed away right before my 18th birthday. So he lived about 9 years, 8, 9 years after disclosure. She actually passed away in 2022. So when I started writing this book, it was a crazy year.
oh,
Um, but I had reached out to her right after my first son was born, so I'm 21, 22 years old. And at that point, she said, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I want to remember Walt the way that I remember him. And then when I reached out to her again later, it was during the darkest time of my life. I felt very strongly that my ex-husband was going to try to take my kids away from me, and I was desperate for money at this point to hire a lawyer to be able to fight that. And I went to her, and this is all through Facebook Messenger, and I still have, all this conversation. But I said, Walt needs to pay for this, like
yeah.
Walt needs to pay for this, because not only was there not, like legal repercussions, because a year of probation is not
No,
it,
that's nothing.
but there was no victims restitution. This was 1990. So he wasn't ordered to, and I don't even know if the sex offender registry existed. I think if it did, it was very, very new at that point, but he was never a registered sex offender. Um, and there was no victims restitution other than my parents had borrowed some money, and when all of this happened, my mom said to him, we don't owe you another dime. Like, do you have any idea what this has cost us? We don't owe you another dime. So my parents did, receive at least some sort of financial, I don't know, whatever, restitution.
Mhm.
But I did not.
Yeah.
And, so I went to her and I just said, like, where I'm at is because of Walt,
Mhm.
and nobody wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
But here I am, and he needs to pay for this. And she's like, Amber, I'm very confused, like, Walt's been dead for X amount of years. And, I just don't even, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And she was either having surgery or I'm in a lot of pain. That's the part that really killed me. She said to me, I'm in a lot of pain. Can we revisit this conversation when I feel a little bit better?
Mhm.
And I never revisited that conversation. I felt so sick to my stomach that I had gone to her. And again, this is a mother, I'm,
Out of
yeah,
desperation.
I've never ever fought harder or felt like I needed to fight harder than for my kids. And just the irony in her telling me that that we couldn't talk about this because she was in pain. Okay. I mean, I've been in pain my whole life, but sure, go have your surgery.
Well, that kind of brings me to 2022. What inspired you, or what turned on of I need to sit down and write this out?
Yeah.
How did that come about of it was time to share your story, all of it,
Yeah.
to write the book?
So I think especially because I had disclosed, right? This is something that I mean, I remember being 15 years old and wanting to write this book, but at that point it would have been coming from the perspective of I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. Look, this didn't affect me and blah 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 because that's how things were handled.
Yeah.
You know, oh, Amber, go to therapy, you'll be fine. This isn't really a big deal. That's how I was treated. And so then I, from a very young age, just began to internalize that. Um, and so it's something that I tried several times throughout my life to talk about. I write about, a letter that I had written my dad, another experience where I brought my whole family together. I'm a mom at this point. I'm seeing my abuse from the lens of a mom. I'm so full of hatred and anger, and then I'm filled with guilt for feeling this way. And so I bring my whole family together, and I'm just, filled with anxiety, and I'm bawling my eyes out, and I say whatever I say, and my dad looks me square in the eyes and says, "Haven't we dealt with this shit already?" And that sent me into a crisis that it took me years to understand and connect all of those little dots to be able to see all of that. Please ask me your question again because I just did the exact same thing.
What brought you to the point where you were
Okay,
ready?
2022.
Yeah,
See,
where
this is
you
why when I'm like, okay, so when I'm public speaking, if I don't have some sort of a script, it just goes everywhere.
It's amazing.
So so wanting to write that story,
Uh-huh.
trying to confront this and talk about it, right? So it's not like I haven't told my story or I guess really haven't told my story, but it's not like I haven't told people what happened.
Mhm.
So in 2022, I am married for the second time. Um, my now ex-husband and I decided to move to Texas. This is the second time in my life that I've left Utah. Other than that, I've really been in Utah. And when that opportunity, kind of presented itself, I just remember thinking, yeah, like you can't heal in the environment that hurt you. And I need to get out of here. So yeah, let's go. Let's do something different. So so I was out of that environment and I was actually back in Utah for work. And a colleague of mine is telling me about this program that he's doing, that's our company, what we do, but he's taken it to his daughter's high school and he's teaching these high school kids all about Linux. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." But he says, "But it's not just Linux." He's like, "We talk about, just life, and I just really want to talk about life skills and different things." And I was like, "That's so cool. Like you can do that?" And so that really is what started all of this in motion is I just remember getting home from that trip and just, oh my God, the hamster wheel is just going and going and going. And I'm like, I want to do that. Like, I want to share my story into tech with high school kids because I don't have a college degree. I didn't take the typical route into tech. I was making $9 an hour working at Winco Foods before I got into tech. And I was only supposed to be in that position for 3 months covering for somebody that was on maternity leave.
Wow.
And at that point, I think I was probably 5 to 6 years into my career, but I built, so this 3-month engagement ended up being a 9-year career in tech where I cleared 6 figures within my first 5 years, something I never thought that I would do. So I wanted to tell these kids, hey, like I just remember growing up, like so many of us did, like, here's the path, here's what you do, go down it, don't deviate, and if you do, you're wrong, you're bad, you're a loser, whatever it is. And so I wanted to be able to say, there's more than one path. Like you are allowed to do the things that you want to do and find your way. So that's really what it started with. But as I started thinking about that, I thought, if I go in and I tell these high school kids, hey, I don't have a college degree and I'm making six figures now, why are they going to listen to that? I wanted to provide a little bit more context.
Mhm.
And so I approached my CEO at the time, Melissa DiDonato, and said, just through email, and this is going directly to my CEO,
Mhm.
hey, I have this idea, I want to share my story, but it's kind of messy and I don't want to embarrass the company, myself, you know, are you open to kind of just providing context? Can I kind of tell you what I want to do? And she responded right away and said, I regret that I don't have time, but I support what you want to do and let me get you in contact with our chief communications officer. And that just started, yeah, they were so supportive.
Awesome.
In the tech world,
Mhm.
they were super supportive of me sharing my personal story. And so I did that with the high school kids. That was like a 15-minute conversation, very well received. And started, I mean, I've always been a storyteller. I enjoy writing and I'm verbal in my storytelling as well. And so so that kind of started me down that. But then they approached me and said, this was all during March and it's International Women's Month. And we have this Women in Tech chapter at the company that I'm in. And every March they put together speakers and, really try to bring in some powerful stories. And they said, would you want to share your story, to our Women in Tech group? And I was like, oh, shit. Yeah. Yeah, let's do that. Let's kind of ride this wave. And so it really was more in preparation for that because that was an hour-long conversation. Um, that I started pulling court records and going back to journals and talking to really my mom and a little bit with my grandma, anything that anybody was willing to discuss. I just soaked all of that in. And so by the time I had, um, you know, had this conversation, I just had so much information and I'm already in the middle of like feeling it that I was like, okay, like,
Right.
let's go. So in 2022, I share my story. I take the week and a half off. I sit down at my laptop and I just start writing.
Hmm.
And then I got sick. Then I got sick. Like I had every intention of publishing the book. In fact, I pre-sold copies to my book. I think I pre-sold about 50.
Mhm.
People at work were so supportive. And that was like, I mean, I am here because, Melissa opened the door for me to do something that I never would have even thought to do. And when I shared my story, what happened was other people started sharing theirs, and so that's why I do everything that I do at this point is because at the end of that conversation with my friend April that hosted, she said something that I'll never forget and I will repeat over and over again. And it is that vulnerability begets vulnerability.
Mhm.
And I saw that immediately and I have seen it tenfold, 100. I mean, it has just been beautiful, and it's such a humbling experience when people come to you, and I know you guys can relate to this because of what you do, when people come to you and share their stories, because you've provided a platform for other people to do that. It this is how this is how we heal.
Yeah.
This is how we prevent, you know, is by doing something that is so scary um and hard because I'm going to go home after this and I'm going to feel like I have the flu. Um but it's worth it because of because of because of the amount of people that can't, get their story out verbally but that need to know that they're not alone. because none of us are. And when you share your story, or when you go looking for that community, when you're honest with yourself and you understand what your struggle is, what your pain is, what your personality is, and when you can go out into the world as that person, you will find your people, and your people will heal you. And all too often, those people are not blood related.
Yeah. I really like how you put that because we've seen that as well. The more we share, the more people we meet, it opens the door for all these other people that are now coming into our lives and the community and doing the same thing. And it's building something so much bigger than just one person, so much bigger than two people.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what happens with that vulnerability word. I mean, we talk about it a lot and
Yeah.
what it really does. That one act of being vulnerable can change the lives of millions of people.
Millions.
And it opens so many doors.
It does.
It opens so many doors.
Yeah. So you really didn't start out to write a book per se. It was, I want to share my story. Preparing for sharing your story is how the book came about.
Yeah. So the I mentioned, being at 15, oh, I would like to write a book. But the title for my book I've had since I was 33 years old, and that came to me at the lowest point of my life. I had just there was a restraining order in place, so I couldn't see my kids. I had spent a night in jail. Um, and I was back at my parents' house, and so again, right here, sitting on the front porch, which was what my thinking spot. And I just remember, like, picturing myself and asking myself, like, how the fuck are you going to get out of this? Like this was rock bottom, you guys. And just seeing myself in this hole, and the only thing down there with me is that shovel that I had used to dig it. And it is so deep at this point that I can't even see the top of this hole. I know that there's not a rope or a ladder. There's no hands reaching down at this point because I've exhausted myself. I've definitely exhausted everybody around me. Um, and just asking myself, like, how do you get out? And as I'm picturing this, just the letters just come to me like HOLE, like you're just in this hole. It's so desolate, it's empty, it's void. And the W just flies in, right in front of that H. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God, that W saved my life that day. Because when you put that W in front of HOLE, it transforms that word. And it completes, it's the wholeness. And I didn't start writing. I just knew. I was like, oh my God, that's the title for my book, Whole, my journey to W, and getting that W back, because we're all born with it, and throughout life, it just starts to fade away. I just kind of pictured myself with an eraser, and erasing this W, and God, I had erased my entire W at that point. But I remember then just picturing myself down in this hole, and again asking myself, like, how do you get out of this? I mean, I have no money. I now have an additional charge on my record, which included domestic violence. And I just thought, like, nobody's going to rent to me. Nobody is going to hire me. What am I going to do? But the way bigger issue is that I have 3 little boys. And how do I show up as their mom? The mom that they deserve. So I just see myself grab that shovel and from one side dig and start to pile on the other side. And I didn't know how, but I knew I was gonna get out. So to be here and to be able to look back and know how much dirt I had to pile to be able to climb up to the point where I then could see that there weren't hands reaching out at this point, but by the time I got close enough, there were people all around waiting for me to save myself, waiting for me to find my whole self. And I've just fought like hell.
So this is almost 15 years from that point to today, right?
Yeah.
Well, just sitting here, being able to listen to you and just feel as you're talking, I feel that you found your hole. I feel that your purpose is just shining bright of what you're supposed to be doing now. And yeah, sometimes we all take the really long route,
Yeah,
right,
we
to
do.
get there.
Yeah.
But now you're able to share the story. And like you said, sometimes it's hard still. And sometimes it's a lot to share it. But at the end, somebody else has now been given that permission.
Yeah.
They're now open to that space to be able to say, okay, yeah, something happened to me. And let me, can I tell you? And so, how does that feel that you are in this space now? 4 years later, the book's out. You're doing all these other things. How does that feel when somebody comes up to you or somebody reaches out to you now and has that vulnerability with you because they had read your book or they had heard something that you've said and that inspired them?
It's the most humbling honor of my life, and it's a huge responsibility. It's not something that I take lightly at all. And honestly, it's difficult because I'm somebody who I want to look you in the eyes. I want to hug you. I want you to know that I see you, I hear you, I love you. That is something that is so important to me, but the bigger that this gets, the more difficult that becomes because there's more people coming to me. That's a balance that I don't know that I'll ever really truly figure out, but what I do know is that I just try, even if it is a moment of my time, I hope that what you feel from me is that I love you. I believe you, I see you. And that even if I can't have you, you know, in my close proximity all the time and take care of you and do all these things that I want to do, that what I'm doing is for you. It's for you, it's for me, it's for anybody and everybody because it's not just for survivors. A big part of my mission is education. Is going out and helping people understand what trauma responses and behaviors look like so that we don't look at the addict, so that we don't look because I've been very fortunate to not succumb to a drug or alcohol addiction in my life, but that does not mean that I have not been scarred, or affected by addiction. For sure, food, I mean, it's still something that I struggle with. So no matter what it is, um, it's just this huge responsibility that I carry and a huge honor that I carry. Um, it is so surreal. It is the biggest mind fuck to go from somebody that hates who you are to loving who you are. And not just for me to love myself, but for other people to love me. To go from being told, don't talk about it, to, hey, will you come on my podcast and share your story?
Mhm.
What? I'm allowed to do that?
Yeah.
That's a huge part of the healing journey that honestly is very difficult, is stepping into receiving.
Yeah.
Stepping into love of self and from others, and the admiration and the praise and just learning to not just to say, oh, thanks, but I also want, if you're thanking me, I want you to know that I feel that and I receive that.
Mhm.
Thank you. for seeing me, because we all have stories and we can all tell our stories, but a story doesn't go anywhere without people willing to hear it. So the listeners of this world are as equally important as the sharers. And that's with the Voice Collective. That's really what I aim to do, is to bring together community where it's people that are sharing, and not, I don't even like to say it's an audience, because it's so interactive. I keep these events very intimate, 50 people or less, very intentionally, because I want us all to be part of the experience. And it's just been this beautiful thing of, yeah, people that, are my therapist reframed this for me at one point, because when I shared the story at work, I said, we've created this brave space, or we've created the safe space. And he goes, no, like, it's a brave space. Like, people that are sharing are stepping into a very brave space. And even that is hard for me to hear. Like, it doesn't, I think, because this is something that I have talked about for the majority of my life, it doesn't feel brave. And yet, once I've done an event or I listen back to a podcast or something, I'm like, damn, girl, like, it is. It is bravery to share your story,
Yeah.
because I'm opening myself up to all kinds of things, and unfortunately for me, so far, yeah, I haven't had hate, that will come. Um, but the safe space is created by the people that have the compassion and the empathy and the love to allow for that. And community is just so huge to me, and we are not meant to do this life alone to begin with. But I think that that's the other, just going back to, like, talking to these high school kids and being like, there's not just one path. I think that we grow up thinking that our family is supposed to be our family, and you were just supposed to stay, here's our circle of people, and you don't really, and if you don't have that, that you don't have anything, and that's just not true. There is community for everybody and anybody. The hard thing is the ability to take that step and to open yourself up to finding that.
Yeah. So from your book, it has obviously sprouted into numerous other things, and the Voice Collective is one of those.
Yeah.
And with the Voice Collective, you were saying that it's you've gathered a group of people to sit on a panel and tell their stories,
Yep.
allowing other people to
Yeah.
tell their stories.
Yeah.
Because there is so much healing in sharing.
Yeah.
What other things have grown from this book and sprouted from your Voice Collective and everything else?
Just, I mean, the healing is phenomenal, and so I'm the founder of Whole Heals.
Mhm.
Whole Heals um is comprised of two branches. So I have the Voice Collective and I have the Leadership Collective. And the Voice Collective really is all things story, book, these community events, bringing people together. It's about sharing your story. Um, and I've done, a handful of podcasts at this point. I've been on every major news station here in Utah, which has been incredible. And I've just started stepping into public speaking as well. So that's just been a really cool experience in and of itself, is that, again, like, it's not just my ability to share, it's that people want to hear it. I'm self-published, and you know, it I think it's like 90% of self-published authors don't even sell 100 books, like, in their lifetime. And there's over 400 copies of this book out in circulation. My Audible just finally launched this week. And this is just within, my little community that I started and it's really starting to spread elsewhere. So that's been such a cool thing, that's happening is that it is so much bigger than me, and it continues to be bigger than me. And I received an email from a woman the other day that my website is in my book. And so she must have gone to my website and she found my email address. And so I had this beautiful email from this woman that read my book and just wanted to thank me, and I just thought, I don't know who this is. So I don't know if it's somebody that's connected to my network. I don't know if she just saw the book on I don't know. But that's what's so cool is that it's been out for just over 6 months, so to see the growth of this story already and the different platforms that I've been given graciously, thank you again, to be able to come on and to continue to spread this message. This is just the beginning, and then we have the Leadership Collective, which I mentioned I spent 9 years in tech and so many years before that in customer service, and the Leadership Collective comes from my lived experience in the corporate world, and that is just understanding that I saw a gap. I saw a gap that after I shared my story at work, so my management team and colleagues knew my background, and yet I still was in different situations where where I was being triggered.
Yeah.
I had one specific incident that really, really is where this all comes from. But I had a colleague that got me on a phone call and said, "Hey, this is being recorded," and had 2 other colleagues on this phone call too. But as the conversation is progressing, I'm very much feeling like he's trying to get me fired.
Oh.
And so at some point I just say, I'm not going to have this phone call. I'm done here. I hang up. And thankfully for me, it was all recorded.
Yeah.
But I immediately call my manager and I'm hysterical. This is less than a year into this new role. I have major imposter syndrome because I'm in tech without a college degree, didn't even know what an operating system was when I started, and I've been able to work my way up. But because I don't have that background, I'm just always asking myself if I'm actually supposed to be here. And so when this all happens, I'm just terrified that I'm going to lose my job. And so I'm hysterical. I call my manager. I tell him what happens. And he says, I said, I think that this person is trying to get me fired. And he said, "Oh, no." He's like, "No, no, 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 no. I don't think that's what's happening." That was well intended on his part. He's trying to de-escalate and calm me down. What he doesn't know and what I don't even realize in the moment is that he's just triggered the shit out of me because he's telling me inadvertently that what I've just experienced didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
That the way that I perceived it is not what actually happened. You're telling me I'm crazy.
Yeah.
That's how I received that. And so it took some time for me to even understand why I had been so triggered in the first place. And then it took me even longer because I was like, what? Like, he cares about me. This guy loves me. Like, he knows my story. And so I really wrestled with that. It's very similar to my parents still going to the temple, right? They didn't do that to hurt me. And he didn't do that or say that to hurt me, but
that's how you received it.
Yes. And what I realized is that it was because he didn't understand. He didn't understand why that would trigger me. So that's what the Leadership Collective is. That's what this training is. It's trauma informed with some neurodivergent centered pieces into it as well, because I'm a mother of my oldest son is neurodivergent and I've had to see him struggle as well as different colleagues. But I aim to go in and help corporations, leaders understand what trauma is, how it shows up in different trauma responses and behaviors, that we all have a nervous system. We are not robotic. We will never be. Well, I guess, who knows?
Not in our lifetime.
Yeah, not in our lifetime.
We'll never be. But really the main goal is providing psychological safety. And what happens when people feel psychologically safe? Retention increases, lawsuits decrease. insurance premiums decrease, HR complaints decrease. That's really, we hear so much about culture, employee well-being, all of that. That's all bullshit if you do not provide psychological safety within your company.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of leadership training out there that is very motivational based, and that definitely has a place. We see that work, but you will never motivate away trauma.
Mhm.
So for me, and coming from the tech world, I'm coming in to do an RCA, a root cause analysis. Where do these behaviors come from? What do they look like? How do they affect your team? But where does it come from? And we talked about this before we started recording.
Yeah.
It's trauma.
Mhm.
Everything is going to go back to trauma.
Yeah.
So I just have this really strong belief that if we can heal the workplace, we can heal the home, because it all trickles down and we spend the majority of our adult lives at work. So why not heal from that side and then take it elsewhere?
Yeah.
That aligns perfectly with our nonprofit Recovery Friendly Workplace. And we are definitely going to have to talk more after
Yes,
this,
I love it.
because it just I think this was inspired,
Yeah.
because this is something that absolutely aligns with what we're trying to do about teaching the workplace about mental health issues, suicide prevention, mental health first aid. Trauma is absolutely one of those factors that align with mental health,
Yeah.
and is oftentimes more than I can even think is the root cause of mental health
Well,
issues.
and to me, and please, correct me if you feel like I'm wrong, but you either have the biological side to mental health,
Mhm.
or you have like the experience,
Yeah. Mhm.
those two things. And a lot of times they can also overlap. And
Or the yeah. Well, there's the numbers out there. It's over 70% of all working professional adults in their lifetime will have some type of mental health challenge happen to them during work hours or at the workplace, at least once in their career.
yeah,
And the other number is 47 million working professional adults as of, and this is back from 2023, is suffered or is suffering with a substance abuse problem on the job.
oh
But
wow,
most of that is diverted, like you just said. There's only two factors: there's experience and there's biological. In my opinion, and I don't know, I haven't seen any of the studies, but my opinion is going to say that experience is going to be a higher percentage than biological,
I'd agree with you.
because we create, or we're put in situations as humans that trigger these things
Mhm.
that we have to go through.
Or even the experience triggers the biological.
Yes,
So,
yes,
I am a generational alcoholic. I know that that is in my genes.
hmm
We have done our genealogy, and we have alcoholics all the way, we've traced it all the way back to the 1500s. So that I know that I am predispositioned genetically to
Mhm.
be an addict or an alcoholic. But that doesn't necessarily, if I had never, ever, ever touched alcohol, never, ever touched drugs, it that might not have ever come into fruition. Um, but it is still built in me biologically. The minute that I picked up that first drink, the minute that I smoked that first cigarette, that biological sense was triggered.
yeah,
So,
That experience opens up that chemical balance.
correct. Yeah. So they are absolutely connected
hmm
and aligned in a sense as well. So,
Oh, it sounds like it's been eye-opening to sit here and listen to your story, because your story is unique to you, but unfortunately your story is not unique because it happens to so many others. And the fact that you're brave enough and got to the spot now that you can share it and you can connect with others through it is just absolutely amazing. And one of the final questions I have that's been sitting on my mind for a little bit now is, you'd said, you have to mindfully be okay with yourself and love yourself. And a couple of years ago, I did this. I don't remember where I come up with this idea, but I did this challenge to myself that I wanted to get up and you stand completely naked in front of the mirror and look at yourself. But then really look at yourself because you really want to make that eye contact with yourself. And you have to be okay. You have to be able to say, I love every part of you. I'm okay. And you have to have that connection innerly before you're able to have that connection outwardly. And we teach this in a connection seminar that we talk about. But I wanted to ask you, when was that moment for you that you were able to look yourself in the eyes and be like, okay, do you remember when that happened?
I definitely remember when self-forgiveness first came into play. And I'm gonna touch on the standing in front of a mirror naked. But I want to go back to like just I was reading The Body Keeps the Score. Again, this was in 2022, and I was like, I need to understand. I need to
Mm.
educate myself as much as possible because I was doing therapy, and therapy is amazing and definitely a key piece to all of this. But healing is multifaceted,
Yeah.
right? We need multiple things coming together, and education is a big part of that. So I was reading The Body Keeps a Score. I read No Bad Parts, Internal Family Systems. I had read different memoirs written by survivors. But in The Body Keeps a Score, this was just such a powerful book because it was the first time that I understood how childhood sexual abuse literally changes the chemicals in your brain.
Yeah.
And I mentioned being 15 years old, wanting to write the book. And from that perspective, it would have been, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor.
Mhm.
Taking that stance from such a young age led to so much self-hatred because I was not given the grace by anybody else. So instead of giving myself the grace of like, no, Am, your trauma actually did hurt you. And these are trauma responses and behaviors, i.e., why I want to educate people. I really just took the stance of like, I'm a bad girl. I also grew up in a very high demand religion. And so I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to own this shit. Like I'm bad. And so any decision that I made, I just put it back on myself and I made it because I'm a bad person. And so reading all of that was the first time in my life that I turned over the decisions that I had made. And we've talked, I mean, there's so much more to this story, but we've talked about me being in jail and me losing my kids for a short time and all of that. So all of these things, I mean, these were major consequences of decisions that I had made. Um, and being able to say, that's your trauma. And one of the biggest things that I have really learned in all of this is that you can't be a survivor if you were never allowed to be a victim in the first place. And I will scream that from the rooftops because nobody else allowed me to be a victim. I sure didn't allow me to be a victim. I went right into, oh, I'm a survivor. Didn't affect me. But you can't heal from something if you don't, there's a huge difference between sitting in your victimhood and allowing yourself to be a victim. And that's such an uncomfortable spot for us because that's where the hurt is. We don't want to sit in that. But when you give yourself the grace to say I was harmed, and these decisions, I probably wouldn't have made these decisions had this not happened to me. Now, that doesn't absolve me from the consequences of my actions, regardless of where they come from.
Mhm.
But, Amber, you can forgive yourself. That changed everything for me, and it didn't mean that I was instantly warrior or thriver because you also can't thrive, is you have to move through that stage, victim, survivor, thriver. But it was at that point that I really allowed myself to go back to victim and to start healing that, the little me, the teenage me, the adult me, all of that. moving then into the survivor. And today I very much consider myself to be a thriver, but still a victim and still a survivor too. So I mentioned food as an addiction. At one point, well, for a long time, but at one point I was almost 350 pounds, so I've struggled with obesity really, really my whole life. And through so much of this, understood that my weight has been a security blanket for me for so long. Um, to be able to stand in front of a mirror completely naked and appreciate the body that I have is just the most freeing feeling, and I'm 45 years old. I hit perimenopause and 20 pounds has come on in the last 6 months, and I'm struggling right now. And yet I just have to continue to go back to remember what this body has been through. Remember what it has gotten you through. So cellulite, fat rolls, whatever it is, I don't this is the body that I have, and instead of hating it, I choose to love it.
Love that. I love how you're the first person that I've heard, because we hear it so many times, don't be a victim, be victorious,
Yep,
or
yep,
don't be a victim, be a survivor. And I love how you've put t- how you phrased, allow yourself to be a victim. And especially with sexual trauma, there's so much shame
yeah,
that is
yep,
clouded over that subject and that situation, that I believe so many people don't actually allow themselves to be the victim.
yeah,
And we hear it all the time, so many times. And I've heard it even on this show, and I've heard it in the community, I've heard it in the media, of you have to be a survivor, you can't be a victim. Don't sit in your
yeah,
victimhood.
yeah,
But I love that you are being vocal and speaking out, that there is a point where you do need to allow yourself to be a victim and to feel that.
yeah,
Because if you don't, then you can't actually reach that survival and then that thriving. So eloquently put.
thank you.
I mean, it goes along with recovery.
Mhm.
Recovery is an ongoing. It doesn't matter what you've been through, and it doesn't matter where you're at, but recovery is an ongoing process.
Yeah.
You always have different stages, and sometimes you move back in stages and you have
Yep,
to restart over.
yep,
But it is during that process of recovering from your trauma, recovering from even, a physical ailment, of allowing yourself to sit with what's happened.
Mhm.
Just like if you break your leg and you're in a cast, you have those moments of I was so stupid, and you have to sit with that
mhm,
and say, you know what? Well, I've got to let my body heal.
yeah,
And it's so easy for us as humans to accept that.
yep,
If it's a physical
yep,
thing, oh, I did this really stupid thing. I feel bad. And then you just process it and you work through it.
yep,
But when it's flipped and it's internal, we have such a hard time understanding that it is the exact same process, that you have to just let it be. And then you have to do the steps for it to heal properly, and know that everybody's healing journey, from victim to survivor to thriver, from addict to being sober to being in recovery, everybody's journey is the same journey, but it is different
mhm,
on the steps and the paths that you
mhm,
take to get to that
yeah,
point. And I think we all have to, like you said, you have to give yourself so much grace and just be willing to let yourself feel that.
yeah,
As you started out the show today, it's just, that's the first step in any type of healing, is recognize that first you got to feel these things before you can move on
yeah.
and take that next step. Yeah.
Um, my last question for you, Amber, is one that we've mentioned on the show before, but as you've gone through life and as you have survived your life's pickles, what was the best piece of advice that you received that helped you survive?
That chaos was my norm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
That when, back in 2022 and I'm writing, but I am married and what I considered at the time to be a very secure, loving marriage. And, things with my boys have settled and, I have this really great career and I'm returning to self-destructive behaviors, through food and through online gambling and just spending. Um, and I go to my therapist and I say, what is wrong with me? Like, life is good. What is wrong with me? And she said, Amber, chaos is your norm. And so when happy, peace, calm comes about,
Mm.
your nervous system, it goes into haywire and like, whoa, we're not used to this. And I just remember being like, fuck that. No, and again, it wasn't instantaneous at all, but and so I don't know if it's necessarily advice. I mean, there was, right? Like, here's how we're going to get
But
through
was
it.
that
But
statement?
Yeah.
yes, that was just so life changing for me because I just remember like picturing, standing at the fire, like here's this fire and I'm getting so hot as I go closer and closer. And I know that it's going to burn, if I walk through this. And that's the visceral reactions, right? Like I was so sick and my anxiety was so high at this point that I was like, it's going to kill me, So I went into the doctor and I got on some meds and I hated them. So I got off of them. But all of this to say, standing in that edge of the fire, I knew that I was at this decision, right? Like, do I let this chaos continue to control me because it's killing me, right? It's killing me anyway. Or do I say, I don't care if I'm turned to ash during this process because on the other side is that phoenix and I'm coming out of it.
Yeah.
That was that moment. And I said, I'm going through. If this kills me, then so be it, because it's already killing me. But if it kills me, it's because I fought like hell to get through this. And I was okay with that at this point or at that point. And I still am.
Yeah.
That's great.
I
I
love
mean, accepting it, right?
Yeah.
It's when you accept that. And people just come at me for saying this, but it reminds me of the Nickelback song, I'm feeling way too damn good. What's going to go wrong?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it is so true.
It is. Happiness is scary.
It is scary.
When it's not what you're used to, it's so terrifying.
And we as human beings self-sabotage ourselves all the time because when happiness isn't the norm, then we freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know we've both done
Oh,
the same thing
I've
multiple times.
Yeah, when I very first met Scott, I mean, I met Scott after a 7-year internal healing journey of myself, like total, completely life turnaround, deep dive into myself. I was content, I was happy, and I met the love of my life. And I remember going to my therapist and being like, I am constantly having this monkey on my back waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why do I feel like I am constantly just waiting for something bad to go wrong? Something bad to happen, something to go wrong. And she had to explain it to me. She's like, that's, your body has been in survival mode for so long.
Yeah.
And she had to let me know that, or just to even allow me to sit with it, to know that I am allowed to be happy. I'm allowed to be at peace. And I don't have to constantly wait for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
If it drops, it drops.
Yeah.
But don't set yourself up for it.
Yeah.
The self-sabotage,
Yeah.
all of that. Yeah.
Push through. Like you said,
Yeah.
just push through it.
Push through.
So,
Break through that fire.
well, the final question we have for you, we talked about a lot of amazing things, and advice and insights, and everything you've said today has been very inspiring. I mean, from start to finish. But if there was one other thing that either you wanted to revisit or one other thing that maybe stands out that you feel today somebody needs to hear, what would that be? What would that message be today?
It usually is and will continue to be find your people. Find your people. We are not meant to heal alone. We are not alone, but that is one of the bravest steps that you can take is allowing yourself to find your people, because when you do, they will wrap you up. They will fight right alongside with you. They will fight for you. Don't come at me in my Facebook comments because my army will get you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just it's that, isolation is such a killer, and it's it's a scary thing to put yourself out there at all in any way, shape, or form. But when you do, you find your people.
Yeah. I love that. That is great, great advice.
If our listeners would like to reach out to you, where would they find you? Where can they find your book? And I mean, you said that you have launched on Audible, and so if you can let our listeners know where to find you and
Yeah, so the book is available. It is on Audible. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
There you go. And Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com carries it as well. And then you can find me at The Listening Lamb on Instagram, Amber Washington on Facebook. And then my company website is www.wholeheals.com. So,
And is it Whole Heels with a W?
uh-huh.
Okay.
Mhm.
Just want to make sure I clarify that with
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah,
So
we'll make sure to put all of
Yeah.
that in the
in the description for
description
everybody.
of the
Yeah.
podcast for everybody. So
Thanks, you guys. This is such a.
This
I
is
feel like every time I do a podcast, they just get better and better, and I'm like, nailed it.
that's
you
great.
did.
Well, we get to change one thing before we sign off, and that is we let you be in charge for a minute. You've sat and told us your story and how everything's affected you and how you've become this person you are today. We like to turn it to our guests and say, okay, what questions do you have for us? Or is there something you would want to know for us? This is the first time we've sat down and really chatted. So
Yeah.
kind of turn the tables to you for a minute and see if there's any questions you have for either of us.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a little, bits and pieces, and it's just it's really cool to sit with a couple, that I know that each of you has done your own work in 7 years. My God, that's amazing. And so when you were sharing that, I'm twice divorced, and love is something that I have chased my whole life. And it's really scary because I really want to fall in love as the me that I am who loves herself, and that's going to happen for me. But you guys show that, to me, and I think to so many other people that finding love, like a real, just healthy, deep love is possible. How long have you guys been together?
7 years,
It'll be 7 years.
April 14th.
Yep.
7 years, April 14th. Will be 5 years married in September. We both swiped right.
Love it. Love it.
So, yeah, but it's interesting. I remember so our wedding song was I Prayed for You.
Mm,
And I don't think I've ever actually talked about this before, but in those 7 years that I took to find myself again, I remember one of my mentors, her name's Juanita. She was asking me, "Are you dating? Are you looking?" And at first, I would constantly tell her, "No, I'm not ready yet. I'm not there yet." And she said, "Well, just pray for it. Pray to know when you're ready."
yeah.
And then once I was ready, she told me again. She's like, "Well, pray for him, even though you don't know who he is. Pray for him and pray for yourself, and the right person will find you." Or your higher power will lead you to that
Yeah.
person. And when it finally happened and when we finally met, it was easy, and it was exciting. And I mean, it wasn't perfect. We still had things to work out and things to go through. But I just remember I, after finding him, I didn't compromise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a whole entire list of everything I was looking for.
Mhm.
And I, he did meet every single thing on my list. And I knew that because I didn't compromise and that because I was vulnerable and honest in what I was looking for,
Mhm.
that it was going to come to me.
Yes.
And it finally did. If we had met 10 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have liked him at all. And he definitely wouldn't have liked me.
Yeah.
So timing is everything.
Yeah.
Intentions are everything. And also just asking for a little bit of help.
I love
So
that.
what about you, babe? Anything to add?
You summed it up.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
This has been such a great episode.
It's
Oh,
been a lot of fun. So
Again, we're so honored to have you.
thank you.
Um,
Honored to be here.
I see a total friendship forming here.
Yes.
So yeah.
you know. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in today. Again, as we started off the show and we'll finish the show, we could not do this every week without all of you tuning in, all of you taking the time out of your lives to listen in, to share this information with all of you today. We challenge all of you, like we do at every episode. There is somebody in your life that needs to hear this today. Maybe it was you, but hopefully that inspires that somebody else that you know needs to hear this. So take this episode. We challenge you to share it with a family member, a friend, a coworker, or even just somebody you meet who you feel inclined that they need this information. Share this episode. Help us continue to grow this community. Let's keep helping each other survive our pickles day in and day out. And until next time, don't forget,
You're a big deal.